Hello, everyone. Steven Shinder reviews in video form. I am back from a trip of a few days, going to and from the Lake Tahoe area. It was quite a trip, but enough about Tahoe when it's time to get to who. Doctor Who, the new episode, newish, I guess, Rogue, which aired last Friday, and I assume you have all watched it because it's Tuesday as I'm recording this, and if you haven't seen it, I don't know what to tell you. But I quite liked this. I think I'd rate this one an 8 out of 10. So the Doctor and Ruby are in the year 1813, and the costuming looks very on point. And we knew from the preview of this, this would sort of riff on Bridgerton. They mention it in the dialogue, and like, oh my Bridgerton, I think is the line. And something that I read up on was that in Bridgerton, I don't watch Bridgerton, but my friend does. And I've overheard this little bit that of the show doing a string version of a modern song. I've overheard that when a friend was watching, and I definitely noticed that here, and I thought that was quite fun. And the character Rogue, I'll just get to it. He's a character, a sort of bounty hunter character who has a huge spaceship, which was supposed to look impressive next to this, the TARDIS, which looks like a small shed. I wasn't as taken with the ship, the spaceship. I don't know, like there wasn't much about the design that stood out to me, but I mean, it is pretty cool, I guess. So Rogue mistakes the Doctor for one of these shapeshifters. They're called Chulder. They're like these alien animal-like beings who love to cosplay as other people, and I thought that was quite fun. That the term cosplay and that whole culture is sort of touched upon in this. It does feel kind of meta, but I don't know. I thought it was fun bringing the cosplay idea into this. And since those are shapeshifters and Rogue does a scan of the Doctor and I guess knows that the Doctor has had past faces, um, or I don't know. That part was kind of confusing to me because once the full scan is done, you see the Doctor's past faces, and I guess because the faces do not look like Shoulder, that's why Rogue knows that this Doctor is not one of them and is something else entirely. And we also get to know Rogue's music taste. I thought that was a fun back and forth there. I kind of wonder how much of a music licensing costed there. But yeah, I think Rogue is an interesting character. And the bit with the holograms of the Doctor's faces, this is something that people were speculating so much about. Like, we had seen the screenshot of just the hologram of David Tennant's face, as a 10th Doctor. And there was some post going around. I was like, oh, the consequences of this scene are amazing or whatever. And people were throwing around that maybe Peter Cushing's Doctor, who played the Doctor in the 60s Dalek films, that maybe he'll become part of the official incarnations of the Doctor, I guess. And when Ruby was describing the word cushy to this woman in this time period, like when she said cushy and said it's comfortable like a cushion, explaining the word, at that point, I thought, oh, are they really hinting at the Peter Cushing thing? Is that really going to be a thing here? But no, that was not the case. There was a surprise face, though. So first of all, and I won't. I'll try not to spend too much time on this part, but it's hard not to talk about it. So all of the numbered incarnations are included in this, and not in order when the way they're lined up, but they're all there. Even the 14th Doctor, so you have Tennant's face there twice. Also, I've been hearing that the picture of the third Doctor used here is from the Children in Need 1993 special Dimensions in Time, which was kind of a crossover with EastEnders and involved multiple doctors and companions, and I thought was kind of fun. It was okay. I don't think it's as bad as people say it is. So again, like loosening the canon and including things that aren't talked about as fondly or considered unofficial by some. I quite like the looseness of Doctor Who continuity. The War Doctor and the Fugitive Doctor are there, which is really nice. You know, the Fugitive Doctor was such a huge revelation during the Chibnall slash 13th Doctor era, and it's great that they're doubling down on yes, the Fugitive Doctor is the Doctor. Because that could have very well been easily ignored by Russell T, but he's running with these things. You know, the fugitive doctor and the doctor being adopted and being the timeless child. Gallifrey destroyed again, basically. That bit I'm not really happy about. The Flux, you know, the destroyed, I think it was half the universe, you know, during the 13th Doctor's era. So those elements, he's definitely continuing those threads, albeit in maybe subtle ways so far. So the extra face that was the surprise was Richard E. Grant, who played, well, first in The Curse of Fatal Death, that Doctor Who televised thing back in 1999, which Stephen Moffat wrote and had Rowan Atkinson as a Ninth Doctor. This was before we got like the Eccleston Ninth Doctor, and it was very comedic. These incarnations died one after the other in quick succession. So you had Rowan Atkinson regenerating into Richard E. Grant, and you also had Jim Broadbent and Hugh Grant, Joanna Lumley as the 13th Doctor in that particular televised thing. So Richard E. Grant appeared very briefly in that as a 10th Doctor, I think he was. But a few years later, in 2003, there was an animated Doctor Who story. I think it was a webcast called The Scream of the Shalka. And the ninth Doctor there is voiced by Richard E. Grant. So I like to think that this face is the Shalka Doctor. But you know, because Richard E. Grant looks visibly older in this hologram, and if it were the Curse of Fatal Death, Richard E. Grant Doctor, he would look younger because you know that incarnation lasted like just a minute. And there are a few different ways people can look at this. Back in 2013, I quite liked imagining that, you know, the Great Intelligence, who was also voiced by Richard E. Grant in the name of the Doctor, I think it was. I like to think that once the Great Intelligence entered the Doctor's personal stream, that he created an incarnation, you know, the Shalka Doctor, the Richard E. Grant incarnation. And then once Clara went in, that was undone. And then I even had this headcanon that Clara going in was what created the War Doctor. And before all this, it was either the eighth or ninth Doctor who fought the Time War. And then now, because of her going in and undoing the Great Intelligence's stuff, that created retroactively the history of the War Doctor. I've also more recently, you know, in light of this episode, I like thinking that had the Eighth Doctor not died, because you know, in the Night of the Doctor, the Eighth Doctor does die, and then he gets revived by the Sisterhood of Karn, and they give him this drink that lets him choose what he wants to be, and he chooses to be John Hurt. You know, even asks, "Will it hurt?" So I like to think that had he not died, he would have naturally regenerated into the Richard E. Grant incarnation from Scream of Shalka. Um, and interestingly, Big Finish right now are doing Eighth Doctor Time War audios that are sort of in this alternate timeline where Cass and the Eighth Doctor get to be doctor and companion, but that probably gets undone so that Night of a Doctor can happen. So, like Big Finish, I don't know how much they may or may not have known about this Richard E. Grant thing ahead of time in this episode, but it would be quite neat if those Eighth Doctor audios kind of segued into the Richard E. Grant stuff for a bit. But yeah, I kind of like to think that something happened in the Time War that undid, like reverted the Shalka Doctor back to the Eighth Doctor, but the memories of the Shalka Doctor are still there deep within him. So yeah, so I think that's there are a couple ways it could go about it. Trying to reason how the Shalka Doctor came about and why he's a part of the Doctor's personal history in some way. So I really liked that bit in this episode. It really does follow through with Russell's comments about loosening up the canon of Doctor Who. It just feels more fun to me. So the Doctor and Rogue are trying to lure the Cholder. So they are basically, dancing around as a couple, and there is chemistry between them. And sometimes rushed romances kind of make me roll my eyes, but there was something about this pairing that felt compelling, even more compelling than like other pairings that I've seen in this show. And when Rogue proposes to the Doctor with a ring, the Doctor is visibly sad, and some people read this as the Doctor is thinking about River Song, but I think the Doctor is thinking about all of the people that he's lost or that they've lost throughout history. River Song and Gallifrey. At this point, the Doctor is the last of the Time Lords again, seemingly. So the Doctor has a lot of baggage when it comes to their history. So there's a lot that could factor into it. But there's also a moment where it seems like, I mentioned the woman that Ruby was talking to, explaining words like cushy and such. And several seconds before this happened, I just knew that that woman would turn out to be one of these shapeshifters. But I did not really buy that she would kill Ruby permanently, at least. So when Ruby showed up and was acting like one of these shapeshifters, I thought to myself, oh, I wonder if Ruby is pretending to be one of them. And lo and behold, that was the case. We later get this flashback where Ruby goes into battle mode. You hear a string version of Lady Gaga's Poker Face. So I thought that was quite fun there. But unfortunately, Ruby and the Chulder are all already in this trap, and it'll basically teleport them to an unknown dimension. And the Doctor has to make a choice, press a button or not. And Rogue basically helps out with this and pushes Ruby off of the thing and teleports himself along with the Chuldor. And yeah, he's gone. And the Doctor says there are as many dimensions as there are atoms in the universe, which is hard for me to believe slash fathom. But I mean, it's science fantasy, science fiction, whatever. But um, yeah, and the Doctor, this romance, however brief it was, it really hurts for him that Rogue is gone, and is wondering if Rogue can ever be found. And he even puts on the ring that Rogue had, and it's yeah, so really huge thing that happened here. And the Doctor and Rogue had talked earlier about how, they've lost people, and it's like, why do we go on? It's like to live for them, basically, live in their honor. And the Doctor kind of reiterates that to Ruby, but Ruby says, stop talking. You don't need to be like this and gives him a hug. And you know, in the giggle, when the 15th Doctor first appeared and he talked to the 14th Doctor, about therapy and whatnot, it sounded like the 15th Doctor had all of his stuff sorted out. But I think we've been gradually seeing that the Doctor is not as completely okay as we some of us may have previously thought. I think I guess it should have been a hint when at the end of the giggle he just runs back into the TARDIS and flies away before doing a proper goodbye. So maybe that was a hint to that. And of course, there have been all these other things that have been happening. And yeah, Dot and Bubble, the Doctor faced racism. And I've seen discussions about whether or not that was handled well and some valid points. Um, but yeah, I think, I was going back and forth how much I like that episode. I think it's around the 7.5 score that I've given a couple of these other episodes. But yeah, the Doctor has been going through so much and putting on a smiley front to pretend that it's all okay, but really it's not all okay. Deep down, there's still issues being dealt with. And it's heartbreaking, even more so in retrospect, because back in the giggle, the 14th Doctor got a hug and seemingly some reassurance from his future self. And imagine how that must feel. You see your future self, it seems like they have it all together, and they tell you they make it seem like it's all going to be all right for you in the future, and then you eventually become that future self and you realize that it's not all right after all. So yeah, I don't know, like that whole thing just it's very thought provoking to me. So yeah, I quite liked this episode, Rogue. It was fun, but also tragic, and it makes you look at past episodes with a different lens, I guess you could say. And I'm really curious to see what'll happen in these final two episodes of the season. And I know there's also a Tales of the TARDIS clip show thing going on. So yeah, I'm definitely invested. I want to see how they acknowledge the Susan Twist thing. I'm assuming, the preview made it seem like that will be the case, and what this could all lead to. So yeah, I'm pretty excited and invested to see the next couple episodes, and then who knows how long we'll have to wait before the next season. I'm sure there are people out there who in the know who know off the top of their head, but I'm trying not to know too much about these things. So yeah, that's it for me, and I'll see you all next time.